single time, and it sticks in our brain, and it comes up at the worst times. This is the Hunter Marie podcast. Thank you so much for watching. Today, we're gonna be talking about intrusive thoughts, because a lot of people have them. I know I've struggled with them in the past, but you can overcome them, and quickly at that. Whether you've been struggling with intrusive thoughts for a day, a few weeks, or a lifetime, together in this podcast, we're gonna discuss my beliefs on how you can overcome intrusive thoughts using the same techniques that I use. So let's get into it. Let's talk a little bit about intrusive thoughts. What are they in the first place? Intrusive thoughts are thoughts that you do not want to have. You actively know you do not have a place for this in your head, and yet here they are anyways. These thoughts creep into your mind when you don't want them there. And oftentimes they come at the worst possible time. What is it that's so bad about intrusive thoughts? Is that they're haunting. Nobody wants intrusive thoughts. It comes at the worst possible times, such as when you're hanging out with someone that you love so much, like your mother or father, and then you have a thought creep into your head. What if this person dies? What about if the worst possible scenario happened right now? There's also other intrusive thoughts that people have, such as when you're driving down the road and you might have someone in the passenger seat and you say, what if that semi just hit us and we died? Have you ever done that? Because I've done that before, and people get creeped out in the passenger seat. They're like, why would you say that? This is the worst possible time to think about that as you're driving in traffic. And to me, in my head, the thought came up, and for some reason I spoke it out loud, which was just dumb. It just makes me make the other person uncomfortable. But also, I believe that it's not gonna happen. That's why I said it out loud in that situation in the car, because I know that's not gonna happen. That's why I felt comfortable addressing it. But there's gonna be other intrusive thoughts where you do not by any means wanna say it out loud, because it's going to either kill the mood or just make the person think very poorly of you. And also, you don't wanna speak it into existence in the first place. Nobody likes intrusive thoughts, and it's something that people struggle with. Now, an example that I can speak about, being a leader for middle school girls at my church, there was a scenario that I'm gonna explain. There was a leader who was my co-leader for a single day. Now, I've been volunteering with the same group of girls since they started 6th grade, and now they're starting 8th grade. So it's been 2 full years plus that I've been with these girls leading at my church. I had a co-leader come in for one day, because normally I'm by myself. My second leader I have been missing for like the entire school year. Last year it was just me with all of my girls, probably like 12 to 18 girls on any given Wednesday. And this co-leader that was with us saw my middle school girls and was judging them because she's a lot older than me. She viewed their physical touching amongst themselves as sexual in a negative way, almost like bisexual or lesbian or something like that. And she addressed it to the group. And then again, after the group, to the youth pastor, who's a woman. And I was there when she addressed it to the youth pastor, but this is basically how the scenario went. My middle school girls were rolling around on the floor during our small group time and just hanging out with each other, making each other laugh, not paying full attention, which is expected of middle school students, let me say that. But they admire me, they respect me, we have great bonds. So I know that when they're messing around a little bit, that I'm not gonna take offense, because it's not a big deal. They're just middle school girls. I mean, they're crazy, like rambunctious middle schoolers in general, boy, girl, it doesn't matter. And I know that there's nothing weird going on, so when they're touching each other, it's because they have their nails done and they've got these long nails. And I don't know if you've ever touched your own arm or something, but it gives you the chills. And these middle school girls do that to each other. They're trying to pay attention and focus in small groups. So instead of talking, they're listening, but maybe they're overstimulated. So they need to direct their energy into doing something physical if they can't actually speak and run around the way that they really want to. At least they're somewhat conditioned, right? Like, I see the bright side, but my co-counselor sees them giving each other chills and up and down their legs or their arms, and she's getting very uncomfortable, I guess. And she was silent almost the whole group until the very end. The one thing that she says to my middle school girls is, it's not appropriate for you to touch each other like that. Like, I know, because I have a 15-year-old son, that I would love to squeeze and hug him all the time if I could, but I don't do that. And I don't think it's really appropriate that you girls do that. It just doesn't send the right message. And so she essentially said something like that. And so the middle school girls were kind of like, awkward, why is this lady saying that? I don't know her, and like, what is she even talking about? And then after the small group, this co-leader of mine brings us to the youth pastor and addresses, hey, Pastor Steph, I was uncomfortable. The girls in the group were touching each other. It was kind of interpreted to me as sexual. I thought it wasn't safe or healthy for them at that age. I feel like they shouldn't be doing that. And I was shocked. And it turned out that the youth pastor was also shocked, because she was like, I know these girls. I know that that's likely not the scenario, but yet this person interpreted it as such. And so moral of the story of this is that the middle school girls got a weird impression, and one of them called me and she was like, Hunter, and she basically explained she has intrusive thoughts about being bisexual now when it was never implanted in her head in the first place. And that is scary. Can you imagine being in middle school and some adult puts in your mind that you like women and you don't? And it was never even a thought in your mind in the first place. But yet, it is now in your head because somebody said it once. So that's something about intrusive thoughts, is that sometimes somebody can say something a single time and it sticks in our brain and it comes up at the worst times or for the worst situations, like being bisexual when you're not and you know you're not, but yet now it keeps bothering you in your head. Now, I'm a very strong advocate for people who are followers of Christ, for following Christ in general, because I gave my life to Christ and he made me new. I am not the same. I'm not the same as I was before I started following Christ. So from my interpretation, this is evil creeping into our minds. That's what intrusive thoughts are. They're meant to break us down, give us anxiety, scare us, and make us think the worst possible scenario so that we can have fear and anxiety and run from the hope and the peace that comes from God. Satan and the devil wants us to be discouraged, to have fear, to be pushed away from our potential, from our goodness. That's what the devil does. He comes to steal, kill, and destroy, and to separate us from God and all his goodness and good gifts. So that's exactly what intrusive thoughts do. It contributes to Satan's goal of stealing, killing, and destroying. Intrusive thoughts come to destroy. And so I coached my middle school girl for about an hour after youth group, and I told her about what intrusive thoughts were and how I've had them before and how I got rid of them. So that's what we're gonna get into now. That was just a small example I wanted to share, a personal testimony of how it's gone for me. So in that scenario, this is what I explained to her, and I'm gonna share it with you today. Intrusive thoughts are not real. They're not true thoughts. They're intrusive. They're not our thoughts. They're evil thoughts that didn't start from us. That's what they are. They're intrusive. They come up and snag your attention when you don't even think that they should be there at all, right? You don't want them to be there, and yet sometimes they'll come up consistently, even for weeks. And just because they exist, you think about them more, which makes intrusive thoughts all the worse. So, with that in mind, how can you capture those thoughts and dismiss them? Well, you do just that. You have to identify these thoughts as what they are, which is intrusive. And you think of them, you say, this thought that I'm bisexual when I know I'm not. Or another example is, oh, what if I drop my baby right now? That's an intrusive thought, and it's so scary to have those thoughts, but you can overcome them, so bear with me. Even if just the idea of an intrusive thought scares you, you can overcome it, simply, because this is what you're gonna do. You capture that thought, and you tell yourself exactly what it is. You say, I hear that I'm bisexual. I am going to drop this because this is not true. This thought coming into my head is false and it's intrusive. It doesn't belong here. It is not my own. It is evil and I dismiss it. And you bring it to God. You pray on it and you tell God, God, this is not my thought. Please get it out of my head. I know I'm fighting battles with evil spirits on this earth because I'm a human and I have a spirit. There's evil and there's good, and the evil is trying to get at me and discourage me and hurt me from these intrusive thoughts. And you identify it for what it is, and you tell yourself, no, these thoughts have to go. And you don't dwell on the thoughts, because that's typically what people do when intrusive thoughts come. They dwell on them and they think about them and they ponder, do I really feel this way? Why do I think about this? What if this were to happen? What if something even worse happens? And you build this up in your head of something that shouldn't even be there in the first place, just because somebody said something that you never got out of your head, or just because of fear and anxiety blowing things out of proportion. Intrusive thoughts are not genuine. So tell yourself that. Tell yourself that better thoughts are supposed to replace those negative thoughts. And that's exactly what you're gonna do. You're gonna capture the thought. You think about it and you tell yourself, this is an intrusive thought. It doesn't belong to me and I dismiss it. Lord, please take these thoughts out of my head. Get them out of my head. And you pray and pray night after night and they will go away. You tell yourself when you're thinking it in your head, even if you're mid-conversation and the intrusive thought comes onto you, you think in your head, this is not my own, I don't believe this, get out of my head. And you keep dismissing those thoughts and they will go away. That's just what they do. But you have to be consistent, because intrusive thoughts will come up one day and then they will come up the next day and they might come back a few times a day. And it's terrifying because you feel like a monster at some point when it comes to intrusive thoughts. But nobody wants to feel that way, obviously. We want to get healthier thoughts implemented in our brain, so that's what you have to do. You have to replace them with healthy thoughts of bringing the light of the truth into them. You bring in the word of God and let them shine light into our life, into the darkness of our intrusive thoughts. Let them correct any misinterpretations or misunderstandings that we have about ourselves, the world around us, our thoughts and feelings. We have to understand that intrusive thoughts are evil, but you can always shine light in the darkness. And how do we do that? With the light of Jesus Christ. And you can't do it without Jesus. You need Jesus to be the light to shine into the darkness. Because if there is no Jesus, there is no hope. There's no hope. Imagine if there was no Jesus, there'd be no hope for life after death or human death in general. There's no hope for that. That's one of the biggest tragedies of being a human, is death of loved ones, especially. Because our own death, we can't even really contemplate, right? If we're the one that passes. But when it comes to loved ones, the last thing we want is for someone we love to die. And the human condition knows that's just about the biggest tragedy that there is. And yet there's hope for the biggest tragedy that we could comprehend. There's hope for death through Jesus Christ, that there is an eternity of beauty and perfection above the earthly understanding. And it's through accepting Christ and believing in him and living for Christ, bearing your own weight of canceling your desires to put the desires of Christ in front of us so that we can live it out and surrender our lives, forfeit the control and give it to Christ, give it to God. Let them handle the stressful stuff. So in doing that, it will help you get rid of your intrusive thoughts. You don't want these thoughts to be in your head anyways. And if you want to get rid of them, you have to shine the light of truth into them, which is that Jesus loves you, that he is watching out for you, that you're protected, that God has divine plans for you, that yes, while evil exists, it will always be canceled out by the light. And we have to find that through Christ, through reading the word and through praying about it. And before you know it, weeks and months are going to go by and you're going to remember, I remember that I had intrusive thoughts a while ago and they were so terrible. They scared me. You're going to remind yourself, I've been months without having them because I did what Hunter said in the podcast. I captured the idea, the fake intrusive thought that was not mine, and I identified it for what it was, which is an intrusive thought, an evil thought that does not belong to myself. And I dismissed it. I told myself, this does not belong here. I'm moving on. My true thoughts are, I wish my parents will live long, healthy lives far into their 90s and have a simple, safe passing. I will never drop my kid, that I will keep safe, careful care of them, and that I will never encounter a problem like this even once. This is never going to happen because God and me are on the same team and I'm very self-aware. I would never do something like that. Or I'm not going to be endangered in traffic because I am safe, I'm protected, I have God watching over me. And if I am meant to live a long and healthy life, it will happen because if it's in God's plan, it's gonna happen. So don't be afraid about having intrusive thoughts. I really wanted to make a video about this because I know multiple people who have struggled with this, who think that they're not good enough, who think that something terrible is going to happen. But I want you to know that that isn't real. That's not a hint of the future or paranoia that has accuracy behind it. No, that's evil trying to creep up and destroy you. But you have to be strong enough and smart enough to let the light of Christ shine in the truth. The truth of Christ has always rung true, as it is the truth, in my own perspective, as well as millions of other followers of Christ. I've never had a promise that I've seen broken that I've read from the Word of God because it is true. It is the only way to live a life of joy, peace, patience, self-control, discipline. Like, there's so many wonderful things that happen when you give your life to Christ, and he will conquer any evil. He will fight every battle and win. There is no doubt in my mind that Christ wins all things. And even though there's tragedies in this broken world, there is a life of eternal perfection waiting when you are hand in hand with Jesus Christ and God the Father. But you cannot access God or eternity without Jesus, because Jesus was the gift that connects us in our relationship with God. If Jesus is not a part of the equation, there is a far distance and gap between us and God, because sin, our evilness, our evil nature, our human sinful nature disconnects us from God because he's too pure to deal with sin. Why? How could we ever measure up to being in a relationship with God? We can't. But that's why we have the human Son of God, Jesus Christ, who was a human, who came to earth, lived a life of 30 plus years, died on the cross because of crucifixion. It was murder. He was murdered on the cross and tortured, and yet he died and rose again. And because he defeated death right there on the cross, we can have a connection to God because of that sacrifice. Thank God that we can access him. I can pray to him. I can have God come into my life and do anything He's there. He's listening at all times. All things that I want to do are for the glory of God. I want him to use me in whatever way he finds fitting. I don't even care. Whatever he wants me for, I will be obedient because he listens to me. He loves me. He cares about me, and he does the same exact thing for you. And I want you to know that. You can get over any intrusive or dark thoughts that you have. Whether you have anxiety or depression, no matter what it is that weighs you down, that is evil. That is not of God. And the only way to cancel it out is through the light of Christ. Let his good word and comfort shine into your life and bring you the comfort that you really seek and that you really need. Thank you so much for watching this podcast today. I am so grateful. This is my first personal podcast, one-on-one with me and the camera. I am very grateful that you're watching. I love you so much just for watching. Please like this podcast, subscribe to my channel, all of my social platforms. I appreciate it so much. God bless you. I pray that you will read the Bible. I will be praying over you as a viewer as soon as I get off the camera. I am so grateful that you are a part of my channel, that you are watching my podcast, because there is great content to come. Thank you so much for your time. I love you so much. Have a wonderful, blessed day, week, life, everything. Love you so much.